welcome. My name is Brian and I'm with the ABI technical support team. And today we're going to be talking about common issues on ground drive manure spreaders. Today's spreader we're going to be working with is a 50 ground drive. This will be applicable to most all the ground drives spreaders that we offer. First, we're going to start on the right hand side and start with the drive wheel. Okay, first things first. So we're going to take this wheel off and we're going to take a look at the wheel pawl behind in the hub. So to do this, we've already jacked up the spreader. We have it securely on blocks so that it is safe to work on. That is one thing that's very important if you are working on this, taking off wheels, doing anything of that sort, make sure it is properly secured and safe to be working on. So first thing, we need to take the cotter pin out here on the very end. And then we'll just set this aside. Then there's a couple of washers here. There is one cotter pin washer which has a little tab to it and two spacer washers. We'll set those aside. At that point we can slide this wheel right off. And then here we have our hub backer. As you look at this web backer, there's a torsion spring right here, and here is your pawl. Bolt goes through that, through the web backer, and this is going to be snug, but you need to have some movement. It needs to be able to easily flip in and out like this. So this one here, if you have any components broken in here, this is how it should look when it goes back together. Another thing to look at, there is a set screw right here. So if this hub spins freely on the axle shaft, it's probably a combination of the set screw and the keyway here. So at that point, if we loosen this keyway, we could slide this out, we could replace the keyway and put the set screw back in, tighten things up and put it back together. As long as we've got the wheel off, we're going to take a look at a couple other components here. First of all, we have the web extension spring right here. Now, depending on the vintage of your spreader, you may or may not have this bracket here. This loop of the spring may go through the bolt right here. If you have this bracket, the spring simply hooks right here on it. The connection point then also varies with the age of your spreader. Some of the earlier spreaders, there is a plate right here that this spring went through, and on the newer ones it goes through the mounting plate right back here against the box of the spreader. One thing just to keep in mind, this spring comes as an assembly with the bolt coming through it, so that then it's an easy install. You don't have to get that bolt separately. The nut comes through from the back side and threads onto the threads. Spring hooks here or to the bolt. And that's what keeps the tension on this arm to drive your apron as you use the spreader. One other aspect here to look at, if you're having troubles and your apron isn't moving, it could be these pawls on the drive sprocket for the apron. Depending on your model, this one has two pawls. Some of the larger models have three of them. But each of these pawls have a little bolt welded to it, and then on the end a spring hooks to it. It's not uncommon that this bolt can break off and then the spring is lost, and when it does, this pawl is just going to float around and it's not going to engage with the ratchet wheel here to drive your apron. So if you're having issues with your apron moving, that is another thing to check, is to verify these pawls are in good shape, they're sitting in the grooves, and they have a spring connected on each end of them. Now that we've covered the points on this side of the spreader, we're going to go ahead and put this wheel back on. To do so, it's always easiest, I've found, to make sure your pawl is here in the up position. It makes it easier to slide this on. So we're going to grab the wheel, lift it up onto the axle shaft, and then at that point we can hold this pawl down to slide the hub over the top of it. And then at that point, we are on there. Okay, so now that we've got the wheel back on, first we put our two spacer washers on here. Then we're going to put our cotter pin washer, which has the bent out tab, and that needs to face out. That's going to keep the washer from spinning and winding down on the cotter pin. And then at that point, we can reinsert our cotter pin, and then we can bend that back and lock that in. All right, now we're going to move over to the left-hand side of the spreader, and this is the side that drives your beaters in the back. So a common issue is that this spring either breaks or this pops out of here. So first, we're going to take the tension off of this spring right here. So to do that, we need to take this rod out here. So we've got a cotter pin, and you may have to work the handles here just a little to get clearance. We can take our cotter pin out, and then at that point we rock this back and forth until we can pull that rod out. Once we do that, we can relieve the tension back here that we have on the chain by lifting the carrier. Now that we have this disconnected, the easy way, put a foot on the wheel, pull up on that, and we've taken all the tension off of it. We'll lay that down. As you can see, we've got slack here. This spreader here is a newer spreader, so you'll notice there's a cotter pin and washer at the end of the tensioning arm. The older spreaders did not have this, they just had a solid rod. If you have one of the older spreaders, you can simply drill a hole in the end of this rod so that you can put a cotter pin in, and that will help in the retention of this spring and arm. We'll walk you through here the replacement of that. To remove the cotter pin, we're going to straighten out our tabs. May have to slide this back just a little bit. That gives us clearance. Take off the washer and cotter pin. To remove this arm, if you rock this all the way forward, then you can slide this up and out. Spring can come off, new spring can come back on. We set it in the slots here. Line it up so that we can pivot it back. Align with the hole there. Washer goes on. Cotter pin goes through. Bend our cotter pin. And then at that point, we're ready to drop this carrier back down. Give it a push. And now we line up right here with our lever, and we put our last cotter pin back in, and then we have replaced our tension spring and have it back together ready to go. There are several other videos that you may want to reference that we have that include more specific repairs to the spreader. Some of those include adjusting the star wheel gap, adjusting the tension of the main drive spring, drive keyway replacement, and lubrication of the spreader. If you have any other questions, feel free to call any one of our customer service team at 877-788-7253. Thanks for watching.